Hi, thanks for coming to Princeton. You've been dealing with risk all your life. I wanted to know how big of a risk do you think that the United States will turn into a Latin America country in terms of crises?
Well, we used to, when we were all in Washington, and even though we were on obviously a very good path at the time, but we used to say if we ever changed paths and developed again the kinds of deficits that we'd had in the 1980s, a little thinking at the time that would happen, but now, of course, it has, that it's one thing to do an IMF program for Mexico, it's another thing to do an IMF program for the United States. Look, I remember Alan Greenspan said once when we were still there, in fact, I was still there because I think I was with, no, I wasn't with him when he said it, but I saw it in the paper, that we'd had these crises, as Alan mentioned, in Mexico and in Asia, and that it was inevitable there would be crises from time to time in the global economy. And at the time, all of us and I agreed with him, but all of us felt that meant at one emerging market country or another. Then people worried about Japan some. But I'll tell you, I don't know what the probability is that we could have a crisis in this country, but it's not de minimis, I think. And if it happens, it's going to be relatively difficult to deal with, and as this gentleman down here pointed out, it would be easier to deal with if it was occurring in the context of a strong continental Europe and a strong Japan, but with neither of those economies strong, it'll be a challenge if it happens. And I guess I would say hopefully the odds are not high, though I do think the odds are high of serious difficulty if we don't deal with our problems, as I said before, but I'd have to say it's more than de minimis.
At the beginning of your talk, you talked about the sense of mission that is in emerging Asian countries. Could you talk a little bit more about what you meant by that term? It's a pretty strong word, mission.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I meant. We had a lunch today at the Asia Society in New York, and I introduced Tim Geithner. Tim, as you probably know, or Geithner, as you know, is the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And somebody asked Tim about China. And he said that every time he meets with the leaders of China, the thing that most impresses him is the understanding they have of the issues they face and the commitment that they manifest, do what they need to do to deal with those issues. Now, they have big challenges, but they have this enormous commitment to do whatever it is needed to deal with them. I remember when we were there, and we used to go to China and meet with Zhu Rongji, who was at that time was premier, and every time we left him, and I was there several times. Well, I was there some number of times, then he came to Washington several times. And I got to know him moderately well. He had an immensely impressive understanding of the global economy and of his economy, and an enormous commitment to do whatever it is they needed to do, however difficult that was. Now, of course, it's not a democracy, which makes it a little bit easier. But take a look. But look, take a look at India. India is a democracy, but if you go back to when the reforms began under Manmohan Singh in, I guess, the very early 1990s through to the current day, with all the frustrations that can exist in doing business in India, a lot's been accomplished. And India's had growth of 6% or so a year. We had dinner the other night with the central bank governor of Malaysia, and she said, we talked about various issues, and she said, one of the differences between, and this is actually what gave me the idea, because she said, one of the differences between Malaysia and the United States is that we are committed to doing what we have to do. And she said, you get the sense in this country that the political system, she didn't use these words, but it's what she said, the political system has lost that sense of commitment. Now, having said that, and this will be my closing note, it is also interesting, though, that when you meet with the people who run these central banks and these large foreign, particularly Asian investment funds and so forth, they do have an underlying sense of confidence and faith in the United States. It is interesting. We had dinner last night with the senior officials from the Government Investment Corporation of Singapore. And the senior official said, he said, and there's nothing I said he would disagree with. Everything I said he would agree with. But he said, when all is said and done, he said, all of us have a lot of confidence and faith in the United States because for so long the United States has been so powerful economically. When you've had problems, you've dealt with them. And it would be nice to think that that confidence is well warranted. But there are no guarantees, and there's an awful lot of work to do, and it seems to me we're going to have a dramatic change in our willingness deal with our problems and the direction of our public policies if, in fact, we're going to deal with them. Thank you all very much.